Hey, it's everyone's favorite British YouTuber here. We've covered the Game Boy Color Tony Hawk's games. We've covered the Game Boy Advance Tony Hawk's games. Now it's time to cover the Nintendo DS Tony Hawk's games. Now, unlike the GBA, there's only 4 of these. They're fairly interesting games. They're a lot more ambitious than any so far. Yeah, we're gonna go through each one by release. Hope you enjoy. This video is sponsored by Viceroy Kicks, an achievement brand for gamers who do shoes. They have some cool designs. I really like these clean looking black ones and these white ones, and some of their shoes are physical representations of you as a gamer, like these ones, which you can only get if you've sunk a lot of hours into a game. The shoes are vulcanized, breathable, water resistant, and built to last, and they have a Kickstarter going on, which you can check out in the description down below. The first game to hit the DS was American Skateland, which is kind of a handheld version of American Wasteland, as it released alongside it in 2005, and it has a lot of similarities. This was made by Vicarious Visions, who also did the GBA version and every other GBA Tony Hawk's game before this, where they set a pretty high bar for themselves in terms of quality. With all those being isometric games, the big question is whether they delivered on this very different graphics engine. It's got this cel-shaded cartoony sort of look where stuff is colourful and outlined, and I actually think it looks quite good, and it's certainly very graphically impressive for an early DS game. It was also the first third-party game to support online play over Wi-Fi, which is very mildly interesting, though it only supported 2 players at once. At first I felt the gameplay was a little odd compared to the mainline games, but I think I was just put off by the weird models and animations, because once you get going, it's crazy how much this actually feels like a mainline Tony Hawk's game. Mechanically, it's all here with stuff like reverts, manuals, special tricks, freakouts, nata, spin, skitching, wall plants, and focus mode, and all that stuff works exactly like it should. The sound effects with stuff like the ollieing and grinding are all the same as the main games, which helps a lot. There's no on-foot mechanics, but that's a good thing. This is actually a very pure Tony Hawk's game. The campaign is set up like Pro Skater 4, where you just go to mission givers and do what they say, and for the most part each mission is focused on skating and skating well. It's not bogged down in too many goofy or annoying objectives, and the map being on the bottom screen helps so much in the missions that have collectibles. The levels are pretty great too. They flow together really well and have a surprising element of verticality with rooftops and power lines. They're general adaptations of American Wasteland's levels, and they don't really feel that limited in terms of design despite the technical limitations of the DS. Really, the only area where Skateland stumbles is stylistically. While the graphics are reasonably nice and impressive, they don't gel well with songs from the likes of Black Flag and the Dead Kennedys. Like, this has a great soundtrack mostly made up from Wasteland songs, but they don't fit in here at all. Also, the plot with that dumb Mindy character and the bad cartoons is just hard to watch, though that was a problem with Wasteland as well. The story does that whole build a skate park thing that Wasteland did, and just generally this is a very easy game. Classic mode is here though, which is a big plus. American Skateland is a surprisingly fun Tony Hawk's game. I got a lot more out of this than I ever expected, and I guess coming again from Vicarious Visions, maybe I should have expected more going in. But in any case, American Skateland is a solid Tony Hawk's game and a great start to the series on the DS. Vicarious Visions followed Skateland up with the DS version of Downhill Jam. Prior to this, I'd played both the Wii and GBA versions and hadn't particularly liked either of them, but for what it's worth, this is probably the best of the 3. On every system, Downhill Jam feels like Activision executives arbitrarily shaking up the formula, so what we have is 3 games that are racing games just as much as they are Tony Hawk's games. This is running on the same engine as Skateland, and it looks and feels very similar, though I think this game has some nicer visual moments and touch-ups. The levels are long and grand, and mechanically with all the physics and that, this feels the most like a Tony Hawk's game of all the 3 versions of this game. They went a lot harder on the online stuff here too. It was heavily praised at the time for being really feature-rich and even having online voice chat during gameplay, which I can't imagine would have been that great of an experience. Downhill Jam is quite a fun game. Like, I'm not giving it enough credit because I simply don't really like the whole downhill thing, but it's genuinely pretty good. It just feels really spin-offy and stripped down, so I don't have that much to say about it. Vicarious Visions' last Tony Hawk's game ever is 2007's Proving Ground for the DS, which mostly feels like a reskin of Skateland, but that's not really a bad thing. It still feels uncharacteristically great to play for a DS game, like, the physics and feel is all good again. Visually, they've rehauled the style, going for that overly gritty look that Proving Ground had, which I think on the DS is a step down from the cartoony stuff, but it fits the style and soundtrack a lot more, so I guess we're good. The amateur, pro, and sick goals thing that the series started doing is here, which I think I only dislike because it reminds me of bad Tony Hawk's games, but it does make this game considerably more challenging than Skateland was. Unfortunately, at least to me, these missions are a bit more gimmicky than those in Skateland. Like, I feel like they were trying to be arbitrarily varied when what was so good about Skateland was just how simple they were. There's more bang for your buck here in terms of content, but the content isn't as focused and it feels more thrown together. They've even tried to put that nail the trick mode here, which just comes down to clumsily copying gestures on the touchscreen. Thankfully, you barely need to use this mechanic. The only other criticism I have is the levels, which would otherwise be fairly decent if it weren't again for Skateland, which did its levels much better. In comparison, these levels just don't have the same kind of flow or verticality to them, which is a shame, but they're still pretty good. The missions try and follow the main game by having hardcore objectives and career objectives, but it doesn't have the impact that it should, and again you build a skate park in the same way as Skateland. It really is a very similar game. I'd say that if you're done with Skateland and you want more, then this is the game to check out. So while I was researching Proving Ground on the DS, I came across some pretty strange things, pretty sort of internet things on the internet, so to speak. And so I found an IGN gameplay video of this game. And the top comment said, "I remember very fondly playing this game to make myself feel better when my grandpa was dying. I was outside the room when it was going on with my headphones." I first saw this and I laughed, and I feel terrible about laughing, but goddamn, it's just the most weirdly dark and sincere thing to read. And then later on I saw this on Metacritic, which I thought was kind of funny too. It was a little brief for a review that said, "There are times when it's pretty much impossible to see what's in front of you," by the official Nintendo magazine. 8 out of 10. So the final Tony Hawk's game on the DS is called Tony Hawk's Motion. And this was a motion-controlled game, which is kind of a terrible idea, as you'll find out. It wasn't developed by Vicarious Visions, it was developed by a company called Create Studios, or Create Studios. You tell me how to say this. And yeah. So being a motion-controlled game on a console without any motion control tech, Tony Hawk's Motion comes with this GBA card called the Motion Pack Motion, which basically tracks which way you're tilting the DS like a gyro. This means that you can only play this on a DS with a GBA slot. I'm bringing out my inner 8-year-old on YouTube by recording my DS screen with a camera, but it's kind of all I could do for this one. Like, it was a little tricky to record. When I'm not playing this game through a viewfinder, I'm much better at it and it's a little less jank to play, but it's not that much less jank. Cast your mind back to 2008. This was halfway between the Wii coming out and the Kinect and PlayStation Move coming out, so it was prime time for the industry to try and push motion controls onto us, and you can kind of tell why this got the green light from Activision, but god is this not aged well. Like, the tilt stuff works, but it works surrounded by heavy air quotes. It's just kind of a bit too delayed and unresponsive to really be playable enough. What's more questionable is how they implemented this motion thing into the game. You use it to turn while skating around, spin in the air, and control balance meters. With it being delayed, just turning is the most awkward thing ever, and then you still use the D-pad and buttons like any other Tony Hawk's games to trick, but they don't turn you. It just feels terrible. The balance meters are also just ridiculous, especially when they're vertical with like manuals and lip tricks. If you don't start the trick with the DS completely level, then the balance meter just immediately slides to one end. It's almost amazing. Like, it's amazing in how bad it is. There's only 4 levels, and 2 of those levels are snowboarding levels, because we all know Tony is a prolific snowboarder. The snowboarding levels are considerably more clumsy than the skating ones. Like, they just don't feel right, and I seem to keep doing tricks without pressing anything. I don't know what's going on. Also, look at this camera angle, which is in both the skating and snowboarding modes. Like, considering how you're always tilting the DS around while playing this, it's pretty hard to see anything with this dumb camera angle. Packaged in alongside this is a game called Hue Pixel Painter, which uses the motion stuff in a better way, but it still isn't much to write home about. It's just funny that this bonus game is genuinely better than the Tony Hawk's game. Basically, this entire package sucks. It sucked then, it sucks now, and it's a bummer that this came out after a set of 3 surprisingly good DS Tony Hawk's games. Go and play those ones, and be glad that I played Tony Hawk's Motion so you didn't have to. So that's the 4 games. If you want to play any of these, play Skateland. Skateland's good. And if you like Skateland enough, just work your way forward. Or maybe go to Proving Grounds, go to Downhill Jam, never play Motion because Motion sucks. Going through this little journey of Game Boy Color, GBA, and DS, I think the best 2 games are Pro Skater 4 on the GBA and Skateland on the DS. I think if you played those 2, you'd be playing the cream of the crop. And if that's not enough for you, maybe play Pro Skater 2 and 3 on the GBA and maybe play Proving Ground here. Don't bother with the Game Boy Color games. But really, don't really bother with any of these. They're not that great. You've got to be really after some more Tony Hawks, but there's a lot of Tony Hawks. Like, there's 4 Pro Skaters, there's 2 Undergrounds. They're all bad after that. Fight me if you disagree. And yeah, I think that this was an interesting experience, and these games are very much of their time, and they don't really hold up. Like, I know I've been praising them a fair bit, but I've been looking at them through a sort of lens. I've been like honing in on their release and the context behind how they were released. But if these games were released today, they would not be any good. But like maybe Skateland, I don't know. But yeah, maybe Skateland and Pro Skater 4. That's maybe a little unfair saying they're all bad, but they're not really worth playing. That's my point. That was a long-winded way of saying that. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoyed all 3 of these videos. If you haven't gone back to watch the others, you should go back and you should watch the others. And you should check out Viceroy Kicks, who are this video's sponsor, the achievement brand for gamers. They make shoes, and link is in the description for that. As always, I love y'all. Well, do I? I mean, I love that you watch me. I don't know if I love you all individually, because that'd be a lot of love, but, you know, let the love and take a hold. Yeah, I'm just rambling at this point. I'm in a pretty weird mood. Have a good one. Peace. Bye.